The tower card falls. Lightning strikes. Stone crumbles. Figures plunge from burning heights. And the question whispered across every tarot reading, every moment of collapse, every sudden end is this. Is this destruction, or is this grace? Neville Goddard stood before audiences in the 1950s and declared without hesitation, "The old man must die." Not someday, not symbolically in some distant spiritual future. Now, tonight, in your own consciousness. He said the very thing you call disaster, the loss, the rupture, the end of what you thought was solid, is often the only way the false structure can fall so the true one can rise. The Tower card says the same thing. It has always said the same thing. So here is the question we will answer together today. What if the Tower is not a warning at all, but a technique? What if Neville left us a complete method, not for avoiding the Tower, but for using it? What if the collapse you fear is the clearing you have been praying for? Let us find out. Welcome to Neville Goddard Universe, where we explore the teachings of Neville Goddard, not as a closed system, but as a living river that runs through the esoteric traditions of the world. I am here because I believe, and I think you do too. That truth has many faces, many languages, and that when we learn to read them all, we discover they are telling the same story. Today we are looking at the Tower card from the tarot, one of the most misunderstood and most feared images in the deck. And we are placing it directly beside one of Neville's most uncompromising teachings, the death of the old man, not as metaphor, not as analogy, but as the same instruction given in different tongues. By the end of this episode, you will have a step-by-step method, drawn directly from Neville's core doctrine lectures in the 1950s, for working with the Tower, not against it. You will understand how to tell the difference between a true clearing and mere chaos. And you will see why Neville would have called the Tower card not a curse, but a blessing. If this kind of exploration means something to you, if you feel the pull toward these deeper convergences, a like or a subscription tells me you are here, and it keeps this work alive. I am grateful for every mind that walks this path with us. Now, let us begin where Neville always began, with consciousness itself. Neville Goddard did not soften his language. He did not cushion the blow. He said it plainly, again and again throughout the 1950s. The old man must die so the new man can live. And he meant it literally, not in the body, but in consciousness. The person you have been imagining yourself to be, the bundle of assumptions and beliefs and reactions you call I, must come to an end. Not reformed, not improved. Ended. Listen to what he said in his 1951 lecture series, "You cannot patch the old garment. You cannot put new wine into old wineskins. The entire structure of your former self-concept must collapse, and in that collapse, the new man is born." He was quoting scripture, yes, but he was teaching a psychological law. The old identity, with all its limitations, its wounds, its inherited sense of lack, must be undone. And that undoing feels, to the one going through it, like destruction. But here is what Neville insisted, and this is the hinge on which everything turns. What appears as collapse is the removal of false assumptions. Let me say that again. What appears as collapse, the end of the relationship, the loss of the job, the sudden falling away of what felt stable and certain, is not random. It is not punishment. It is the inevitable and necessary removal of assumptions that were never true to begin with. You were living inside a structure built on the belief that you were limited, unworthy, separate, dependent on conditions outside yourself. That structure was never real. It was a construct of consciousness. And consciousness, when it awakens to a new assumption, cannot sustain the old one. The structure falls. It must fall. Neville used the image from Scripture constantly. Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone, but if it dies, it bears much fruit. He would say to his audiences, "You are that grain. The shell must crack. The old form must give way." And what rises from that death is not less than you were. It is what you have always been beneath the false covering. Now let me give you an example, because this is not abstract philosophy. This is lived experience. A woman comes to one of Neville's lectures in Los Angeles in 1952. She is holding herself together by a thread. Her marriage has ended. Her business partner has left, taking half the clients. She has lost the apartment she loved. Everything she built her sense of self upon is gone. She sits in the back row, and she hears Neville say, "The old man must die." And something in her breaks open, not into despair, but into recognition. She writes to him later. She tells him that in the moment she stopped fighting the collapse, stopped trying to rebuild what had fallen. She felt something shift. She realized she had been living as a woman who needed those things to prove she was valuable. The marriage, the business, the apartment, they were not supports. They were reflections of an assumption she had never questioned. I am only safe if these conditions are met. And when the conditions vanished, the assumption was revealed as false. She was still here, still conscious, still, I am. Neville wrote back, and his words were simple. You have seen the truth. The collapse was grace. That is the teaching. The death of the old man is not a tragedy you endure. It is a liberation you allow. And it happens not once in a lifetime, but again and again, every time you outgrow an assumption. Every time you step into a larger sense of self, the smaller self must die. And it dies the only way a false thing can die, by being seen as false. Neville said, "You do not destroy it. You withdraw belief from it." And the moment belief is withdrawn, the structure collapses as if it had never been. That is the law. That is the method. And that is exactly what the Tower card depicts. The tarot is a book without words. It is a psychological map, a sequence of archetypal images handed down through centuries, and every card is a mirror held up to consciousness. The Tower is card 16 in the major arcana, and it is the card no one wants to draw. Lightning, flames, bodies falling from a crumbling tower. Destruction, catastrophe, the end of everything. But here is what the deeper esoteric traditions have always known, and what every true reader of the tarot will tell you. The Tower is not a punishment. It is a correction. It is not chaos. It is clearing. In the Kabbalistic tradition, which many scholars link to the tarot's origins, the Tower corresponds to the path between Had and Netzach, between intellect and emotion, structure and flow. It is the lightning flash of divine disruption, the moment when a structure built on falsehood is struck down so that truth can be restored. The Tower does not destroy what is real. It destroys what was never real to begin with. It shatters the illusion so you can see what was always there beneath it. Listen to this from the Hermetic tradition, from the Kybalion. The half-wise, recognizing the comparative unreality of the universe, imagine that they may defy its laws. Such are vain and presumptuous fools. The truly wise, knowing the nature of the universe, use law against laws, the higher against the lower, and by the art of alchemy transmute that which is undesirable into that which is worthy, and thus triumph. The Tower is that transmutation in its most violent and visible form. It is the moment the false law, the false structure, is struck by the higher law, which is consciousness itself, awake. Now place this beside Neville. He said again and again, consciousness is the only reality. He said, the world is yourself pushed out. Which means that every structure you see in the outer world, every relationship, every situation, every condition, is an externalization of an assumption you are holding in consciousness. And when you change the assumption, the outer structure must change. It has no choice. It has no independent existence apart from your belief in it. So what happens when you assume a new state? When you claim, as Neville taught, I am loved, I am abundant, I am free, while still carrying the old assumptions underneath? What happens when you affirm wealth while still believing deep down that you are unworthy? What happens when you claim confidence while still identifying with fear? The structure splits. The dissonance becomes unbearable. And consciousness, which cannot sustain two contradictory assumptions at once, does what it must. It collapses the false one. That collapse is the tower. Neville said in a 1953 lecture, "When you dare to assume you are the man or woman you want to be, everything in your world that contradicts that assumption will begin to fall away. Do not be disturbed by it. Do not mourn it. It was never serving you. It was only reflecting the old assumption. Let it go. Do you see it? The tower card is not something that happens to you. It is something that happens through you when consciousness shifts and the outer world catches up. The lightning is not punishment. It is alignment. The fire is not destruction. It is purification. The falling figures are not victims. They are old identities that have served their time and must now release. Here is the line from the tarot tradition that resonates like a bell. The tower appears when a foundation built on lies is struck by the lightning of truth. And Neville would say, yes. And you are the lightning. So when you pull the tower card, or when you feel the tower energy in your life, the sudden upheaval, the unexpected loss, the structure falling apart, the question is not, what did I do wrong? The question is, what false assumption is being cleared so the true one can take root? That is the shift. That is the reframe. Tower equals blessing. Because the thing that is falling was never yours to begin with. It was only the reflection of the old man. And the old man must die. Now we come to the method. This is not theory. This is not contemplation. This is a step-by-step technique drawn directly from Neville's teachings in the 1950s, applied specifically to moments of tower energy. Those times when everything seems to be falling apart, and you are standing in the rubble wondering if you will survive. You will. But more than that, you will use this moment. You will turn collapse into creation. Here is how. First, identify the false assumption. Neville taught that every condition in your life is the result of an assumption held in consciousness, whether you are aware of it or not. So when something falls away, when the job ends, the relationship shatters, the plan collapses, your first move is not to scramble to rebuild. Your first move is to ask, what was I assuming about myself that made this condition necessary? Let us say you have just lost a job. The tower has struck. The immediate reaction is fear, panic, stories about money and security and failure. But Neville would stop you right there and say, no, go deeper. What were you assuming about yourself in that job? That you were limited? That you needed permission? That your value came from the role you played? Write it down if you need to. Speak it aloud. Name the assumption clearly. Because once you name it, you see it for what it is, a belief, not a truth. And beliefs can be changed. Second, accept the collapse as deliberate. This is where most people falter. They see the tower as random, as punishment, as evidence that something is wrong with them. But Neville taught the opposite. He said, everything in your world is your own wonderful human imagination pushed out, which means that even the collapse is yours. Not as blame, but as power. Your deeper consciousness, the I am that you truly are, is clearing the field. It is making space. It is saying, this structure no longer reflects the truth of who you are. Let it go. So instead of resisting, instead of mourning, you pause. You breathe. And you say, aloud, if possible, I accept this. I accept this. I do not understand it fully, but I accept that this collapse is making way for something truer. The old man is dying. I let him go. This is not resignation. This is consent. And consent, Neville taught, is the doorway to transformation. Third, enter the silence and assume the new. Now you do what Neville called the most important work of all. You go into imagination, into the silence of your own consciousness, and you assume the state of the person for whom this collapse was the perfect clearing. Not someday, not when things get better, Now, here is the technique. Sit or lie down in a comfortable position. Close your eyes. Let your body relax completely. Bring your attention inward to that quiet space Neville called the stillness where creation occurs. Now construct a simple scene. Not elaborate, not complicated. A scene that implies the tower has done its work and you are standing in the new reality. Maybe you see yourself in a new role, doing work that feels aligned and true. Maybe you hear a friend congratulate you on the unexpected turn your life has taken. Maybe you feel your own sense of relief, of rightness, as you realize you are free. Feel it. Do not watch it from a distance. Be in it, Neville said. You must make the imaginal act as vivid and as real as you would a physical act. Hear the sounds. Feel the texture of the moment. Let the assumption settle into your body, into your nervous system, until it feels more real than the rubble around you. And then, this is crucial, you loop it gently, over and over, until you feel the shift. Not excitement necessarily, not fireworks. Just a quiet knowing, a sense of, yes, this is true, this is done. Neville called this the feeling of the wish fulfilled. When you have that feeling, you rest in it. You do not ask how, you do not plan. You simply return to the silence and assume the state, again and again, until it is no longer something you are imagining. It is something you care. If the tower event is still replaying in your mind, if you keep seeing the moment of collapse, feeling the shock, reliving the loss, you go back in imagination to the moment it happened, and you rewrite it, not to deny that it occurred, but to change the meaning you gave it. You imagine hearing the news, seeing the end, and instead of fear or grief, you feel calm, you feel certainty. You say to yourself in the revised scene, "This is clearing the way. This is exactly what needed to happen." And you let that new meaning replace the old one. Neville promised that revision changes not just your memory, but the energetic imprint of the event. It dissolves the charge. It frees you to move forward without dragging the weight of the old story. Fifth, persist in the new assumption. The tower falls once, but the new state must be built day by day, moment by moment, through persistence. Every time the old fear arises, every time the mind says, "But what if?" you return to the silence. You return to the scene. You return to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. This is what Neville meant by living in the end. You do not wait for evidence. You live as if the new assumption is already true, because in consciousness, it is. This is the complete method. This is how you use the tower. You do not fight it. You do not fear it. You recognize it as the clearing it is, and you cooperate with it by assuming the state that the clearing is making room for. You become the new man while the old man dies. And you do it in imagination first, which is where all creation begins. Step back with me now, and let us ask the larger question. Why does this teaching appear again and again across centuries and continents in language after language? Neville stood in mid-century America and taught the death of the old man. The tarot, emerging from medieval Europe but drawing on streams far older, depicted the tower as sacred destruction. The Kabbalists spoke of the lightning flash that shatters the false vessels so the light can be received. The Vedic tradition taught neti neti, not this, the relentless stripping away of false identifications until only the true self remains. The alchemists wrote of the negredo, the blackening, the dissolution of base matter that must occur before the gold can emerge. They are all describing the same process, the same law, the same movement of consciousness. Because here is the truth they all converged upon. You cannot become what you are until you stop pretending to be what you are not. The structures we build, the identities, the roles, the conditions we cling to, are not supports. They are disguises. They are the ways we have learned to survive in a world we believed was outside us, separate from us, more powerful than us. And as long as those structures stand, we cannot see what we truly are. We cannot know the I am that Neville spoke of, the God in man, the consciousness that is the only reality, so the structures must fall, not as punishment, but as revelation. The tower is the moment the disguise is torn away. And yes, it is terrifying. Because we have mistaken the disguise for the self, we have believed the tower is us, and when it falls, we think we are falling with it. But Neville said, "You are not the tower. You are the ground it was built on. You are the consciousness that imagined it into being. And when it falls, you remain." The deeper traditions say the same. The Upanishads declare, "Tat tat tavam asik, thou art that. You are not the form. You are the formless awareness in which all forms arise and dissolve." The tower can fall 1,000 times, and you remain untouched. Because you are not in the structure. The structure is in you. This is why the teaching recurs. Because it is not cultural, it is not historical. It is structural to the nature of consciousness itself. Growth requires release. Expansion requires the surrender of contraction. The new cannot be born until the old is cleared away. And every tradition that went deep enough into the mystery of consciousness discovered this law and tried to hand it down. Neville did not invent this teaching. He remembered it. He lived it. And he translated it into the simplest, clearest language he could. Assume the state. Feel it real. Let the old fall away. The tower is not your enemy. The tower is your liberation. It clears the ground so you can build. Not from need, not from fear, but from the truth of who you are. That is the convergence. That is the unity beneath the surface. And that is why, when you understand the tower and the death of the old man as one teaching, you stop fearing collapse. You start seeing it for what it is, the first movement of grace. So here is what you now know. The tower card is not a warning. It is not a curse. It is a clearing. And Neville Goddard gave you the method to work with it, not against it. When the structure falls, when the job ends, the relationship dissolves, the plan crumbles, you do not panic. You do not scramble to rebuild the old form. You stop, you breathe, you ask, what false assumption is being cleared? And then you go into the silence, into the stillness of your own imagination, and you assume the state of the person for whom this collapse was necessary. You assume the state of the new man. You feel it real, you persist in it, and you let the old man die. If this exploration has touched something in you, if you feel the resonance of these truths meeting across time and tradition, a like or a subscription keeps this work going, and I am deeply grateful for everyone who chooses to walk this path with us. The traditions were never separate. They were always speaking the same language, waiting for someone to hear the harmony beneath the words. Neville heard it. The mystics heard it. The esoteric streams have always known. And now you hear it too. Tower equals blessing. The collapse is the clearing. The destruction is the doorway. And on the other side is not loss, but the truth of who you have always been, finally free to rise. Tonight, before you sleep, if something in your life feels like it is falling apart, do not fight it. Go into imagination. Build the scene of the new life, the true life, the one this clearing is making space for. Feel it as real. And then let yourself fall asleep in that feeling, knowing that consciousness is already rearranging the pieces, already building the form that reflects the new assumption. The tower has done its work. Now you do yours. And trust this, what is real in you cannot be destroyed. What is false in you cannot remain. And the moment you stop defending the false, the real can finally stand. That is the law. That is the method. That is the promise. And it has always been true.